What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Full 90 for another week 12 of Premier League predictions. If you don't want to miss a single football related upload on this channel, then be sure to subscribe down below and turn on notifications, and be sure to leave your comment down below on what you think this week's scores are going to be. So your 10 predictions, just like Camo18 did last week. So the shout out this week goes to you, man. Decent predictions there. You didn't do too badly. So now we're going to check and see how I did with my week 11 predictions, and then move on to the week 12 of Premier League predictions. Now, obviously, I did upload the start of my new series, Beat the Bookies, last week. I'm going to put that on hold and possibly change the series up a bit, because the way I was doing it, I had a few comments saying maybe I should share some bets before the games happen, so you guys can sort of do it along with me if you want. So I might change the series up a little bit to give you guys some recommended accumulators that I think have good value and stuff, and that can be the new format of the Beat the Bookies series. So if you want to see that, then let me know down in the comments as well. But anyway, Premier League predictions. I do also want to quickly say that I'm thinking of doing other football related videos on this channel, maybe some reaction videos to football related stuff, reactions to games, best moments, that sort of thing. So again, let me know everything down in the comments. Starting with week 11, we had Bournemouth versus Manchester United, and I got this one absolutely bang on. I said that Manchester United, in my opinion, would win it 2-1, scoring the second goal in Fergie time or stoppage time, and that is exactly what they did. Bournemouth went 1-0 up, deservedly so. They were playing really well, and then Manchester United got the first goal back and then the second goal back in stoppage time for the 2-1 scoreline that I predicted. The next game, Cardiff versus Leicester, I thought Leicester would score plenty of goals in this game using their passion that they had, obviously, from the tragic events with the helicopter crash, and that's not to say they didn't play well and with passion, and they did manage to get the win and do their own a proud, winning 1-0. So correct result and obviously an incorrect scoreline. The next one, Everton-Brighton, I predicted a 2-0 Everton win. It was a 2-goal winning margin, but it was actually 3-1 to Everton in the end. Now, the banana skin of the weekend, I predicted 2-0 to Watford against Newcastle, thinking that Watford would just, you know, kind of walk all over them and it would be easy, but Newcastle actually won 1-0, so crazy result there. Good for Newcastle to get their first win, and obviously later on we have Huddersfield getting their first win, so there are no more winless teams in the Premier League. The next game, I predicted West Ham would beat Burnley, but it would be low scoring and it would be 1-0. It was completely the opposite. West Ham did beat Burnley, but it was a 4-2 goal fest, so I think that's good signs for West Ham in terms of attack, which is, you know, obviously, like I said, a good sign. The next one, Arsenal versus Liverpool. I think I did go 3-1 Liverpool a little bit because I'm an Arsenal fan and I didn't want to sort of appear biased. Maybe 2-1 probably would have been a more realistic prediction, but in the end Arsenal held Liverpool to a 1-1, so that was a point split down the middle. Liverpool having a bit of a shaky period. I said a few weeks ago that I think Liverpool were a little bit overrated, and just because of how high everyone's expectations are of them, because it finally looks like someone is ready to challenge City for the title. And since I've said that, Liverpool's form hasn't been that great. They lost to Red Star Belgrade last night at the time of recording, and it's just been a little bit dodgy for Jurgen Klopp lately, but I'm sure they'll get back to it soon. The next game, Wolves versus Tottenham, I predicted that Tottenham would win by a goal and Harry Kane would push them over the line. That did happen. Harry Kane did score the third goal, and it was actually 3-2. So they won by 1 goal, Harry Kane scoring the winner, but it was 3-2 instead of 2-1. So a decent prediction there. And again, the second time on this channel, I've predicted a 5-0 scoreline, and the second time it's turned out to be a 6-1 scoreline, because I predicted Manchester City would beat Southampton 5-0, and they actually thumped them 6-1. The next game, Chelsea Crystal Palace, when I was watching the results come in for the game, I was thinking in my head that I thought it would be 3-1 to Chelsea. I had a feeling Crystal Palace would score. I can't remember what I said in last video, but my final prediction was actually 3-0 to Chelsea, but it was 3-1. I think I might have said in the video it wouldn't surprise me if Palace did score, so very close on that one. And the final game, I didn't do so well. I predicted it would be goals either end, Huddersfield against Fulham. I predicted a 2-2 draw, and Huddersfield managed to hang on to the 1-0 win thanks to a disallowed goal. That could have easily been a draw, but a good win for Huddersfield nonetheless. So overall, apart from the Newcastle-Watford game, really a very decent week for me and my Premier League predictions. Now we move on to week 12. This one is a very interesting week. It's a difficult week to pick, and there aren't as many clear-cut results as previous weeks, and I've gone a little bit sort of risky on some games, but you'll see what I mean either way. The first game coming up, Cardiff against Brighton. Now, if there's any game that has a draw written on it, it's Cardiff at home to Brighton. I'm calling this one as a 1-1 draw. I think Cardiff are starting to adapt to the Premier League, you know, atmosphere. Brighton have been doing decent. They've been doing all right, but their away form, as we all know, is pretty terrible. So with that being said, I think it is going to be a draw, and like I said, 1-1, because Cardiff, they can score at home. They even scored against Liverpool. It was a bit of a lucky goal, but they can score, they can get the job done, and in their game against Leicester, even though they lost 1-0, they proved that they can hold themselves at the back. Leicester, a very attacking, counter-attacking team, and they managed to hold them to only a 1-0 loss. So I do see this being a 1-1, a very interesting game between Cardiff and Brighton. The next game is Huddersfield against West Ham, and West Ham can clearly score goals. They scored 4 against Burnley. Obviously, they let in 2, so I think it's going to be a similar result here. I'm going with a West Ham 3-1 win over Huddersfield. West Ham definitely have more firepower going forward, and but I do think Huddersfield will be able to nick one here. It's similar in the way they did to Fulham. I just think West Ham will be far better than Fulham at finishing their chances, so that's why I'm going with a 3-1. The next game is Leicester against Burnley. Burnley aren't in the best spot right now. Their form is definitely dipped, and Leicester, they're fairly solid. They're playing decently well, and they're getting all right results. So I'm going with a 2-0 home win here to Leicester. I definitely think they can do that. I think Leicester beating Burnley is one of the more clear-cut results of the weekend, in my opinion. Now, this next game, Newcastle versus Bournemouth, I kind of struggled with for the result. Initially, you look at that, you look at the season, you look at everything else, you think Bournemouth should win that easily. But then I thought I was going to go with a 1-1 draw. Then I was going to go with a 2-2 draw because I know Newcastle can score goals. They scored 2 against Man United in the first, 15 minutes. And obviously, Bournemouth are very attacking. They play some really lovely football. Their goal against Manchester United was one of the goals of the week in terms of the team play. It was really, really good. And obviously, going to St. James's Park is a lot harder for any team than playing at their own home ground. So I do actually think this is going to be a closer game than the stats might suggest. But even that being said, and although Newcastle won last week and Bournemouth lost last week, I just can't look past Bournemouth in their form, because yes, they lost against Manchester United, but you could argue that was a little bit unlucky, really. So I'm going with a Bournemouth 2-1 away win, but this is another one of those games where if it does draw, it wouldn't surprise me. And to be honest, if Newcastle do the same thing again, get a 1-0 win or something, that also wouldn't surprise me. So seeing Newcastle pick it up a little bit now is interesting, and I think Bournemouth are probably the most likely winners to pick for this game, but it could go either way, so that's why I'm keeping the scoreline very, very close. This next one is probably even closer at this point. Southampton against Watford. Similar to the way Newcastle won 1-0 last week, I think this could be Southampton's week to finally get something, because they've really struggled. In the last 5 or 6 games, they've only scored 1 goal, which was against Manchester City, but it was a penalty. So they really are struggling in front of net. But looking at Watford as well, Watford are kind of struggling as well. They're a little bit up and down. They beat Wolves, which was great, but then they obviously lost to Newcastle, and the results, it doesn't really add up for Watford. You kind of don't really know what you're going to get here, and I think with the home advantage, I think Southampton, it's quite a risky prediction. I think the likelihood is Watford will win, but I'm going to go with a 1-1 scoreline, Southampton and Watford, which I don't think many people will be predicting. I think, like the Bournemouth win against Newcastle I've predicted, I think the most likely outcome is Watford to win, but given the last few weeks, you just can't trust them, and maybe Southampton, seeing how Watford have played at home, will genuinely feel like they can get something, and if they make some more chances, they should be able to get something out of this game, which is why I'm going with a 1-1 draw. But if I had to pick a winner, I'd go with Watford, but for the video, we're going with a 1-1. The next game, Crystal Palace versus Tottenham. I'm just going to say it. I've gone for a straight-up 2-0 away win to Tottenham. Palace, very up and down this season. You never know what you're going to get, but I think for the most part, they haven't been playing the best, and their away form tends to be better than their home form, especially this year. So I think Tottenham, they're on a good win streak. They came back from 1-0 down against PSV, deservedly so. They should have won that game, and they managed to in the end. And I think Tottenham will be riding high after that Champions League win and should get the points here. They're a better team than Palace, and yeah, 2-0 is all I see here. The next game, Liverpool versus Fulham. I think Liverpool will be very grateful that they're playing Fulham, who I think are bottom of the table. If not, they're somewhere in the relegation zone. I'm going for a 3-0 home win here at Anfield. Liverpool don't really concede many, and Fulham don't really score many, and they let in a fair few. I don't think it's going to be like a 5-0 to Liverpool or a complete stomping, but I think it's going to be a very confident 3-0 win to Liverpool, so we'll move on from there. The next one, Chelsea versus Everton. I've gone for a fairly low scoring, I guess you could say, but routine 2-0 win to Chelsea. I think Chelsea are going to keep pushing at the top of the table, trying to get into that top spot. I think it's going to be very close this year, to be honest. I do think Manchester City are going to win the league. I'll put that out there right now. But I do think Chelsea, they're doing very well this season, probably better than most people expected. And I'm going with a 2-0 win. Even though Everton, they're doing all right. They've picked up some form recently. They're very good on the attack, and they're fairly solid at the back. I think Chelsea are just the next level above them, as the table usually does suggest. Chelsea in the top 4 or 5, and Everton in the top 8, you know, usually. So I do think Chelsea, being the better team, will get the win. The next game, Arsenal against Wolverhampton. Now, Wolves, they are so unpredictable as well. There's so many games this week, you don't know what could happen. Wolves could randomly win 3-0 in this game. I genuinely believe that could be a shock result of the weekend. And next week, when it happens, you can watch this video and see that I said that. But, you know, realistically, Arsenal are playing some decent football this year. They're on, I think, a 14-game unbeaten streak, majority of which have been wins. 2 draws, 1 against Palace, 1 against Liverpool, which is very, very good. I mean, they are playing the Europa League before this game, but that's against Sporting at home. They'll probably play a weaker team to their first Premier League side because they're doing well in the Europa League. I think Arsenal are going to win this game 3-1. Possibly a similar situation to the Crystal Palace game. Not the Crystal Palace game, the Leicester game. A similar situation where it could be 1-1 at half-time and 3-1 at full-time. I can really see that happening. But I've gone with Arsenal 3, Wolves 1 to continue Wolves' slight dip in form. And now the final game. This is the biggest game of the weekend. The Manchester derby. Man City versus Man United. And I think it's going to be a close one, actually. It could be very easy to say, you know, 4-0 to Manchester City. But I think United are starting to turn a corner. I think there was so much pressure on Mourinho about a month ago. They were doing so badly. It could only really go up from there, and it kind of has done. Obviously, it remains to be seen at the time of recording how Manchester United play against Juventus, whether or not they get something out of that game or whether they get absolutely pumped. But the same can be said for Manchester City, who are playing Shakhtar Donetsk. I expect Man City to beat Shakhtar. Man United against Juve, they'd be happy with a draw, I think. But I've gone for a 2-1 Manchester City scoreline. It could be 3-1 Man City. It could be a shock 2-2 in this game. I genuinely think Manchester United are going to make it competitive and turn up and try and flip people's opinions on Manchester United. And I think they are on their way up. Obviously, I think Manchester City are going to win, but I think it's going to be very, very close, and that's why I'm going with 2-1 to Manchester City. My lowest scoreline prediction for Manchester City this year and this season so far. So I'm really interested to see the result of the Manchester derby, actually. There's some really good games here. Chelsea and Everton's a good one. Arsenal Wolves is a good one. Tottenham Palace is a good one. All of these games are decent games, and they're very well evenly matched for the most part. Other than Liverpool and Fulham, the rest of them are fairly evenly matched. So that is going to do it for this video. If you did enjoy it, be sure to leave a like on it. Let me know, like I said, down in the comments, your predictions. Let me know what you think of my future ideas coming up that I've spoke about in this video. And that just about does it from me. So I will see you in the next video very soon.